Good morning, everyone. It is I, Ariana Nuna. Hello, good morning. Hello to all 5 viewers in my Twitch channel right now. Thank you so much for tuning in on Twitch. Today, um, as we all have always done on every alternate mornings, we are going to read a book. And the current book that we are reading right now is Natsume Soseki's I am a cat. 吾輩は猫である in Japanese. We are currently in volume 2, chapter 3. I think in each volume there are three chapters, so we're probably going to finish volume 2 today. Um, as usual, I spend about 10 minutes before I start reading just to chat with everyone here today. Let's take a look. Just take a look. There's Dian. Dian's my basically my manager. One of these days, I'm gonna start paying her for all the service that she does for me, right? And um, and then there's Flynn. I don't know where Flynn is. Flynn is here somewhere. And I see Wine Addict. Wine Addict, I think I talked to Wine Addict on Twitter, probably. I saw her, maybe not talk, but I saw her on Twitter the other day. And I'm very happy to see her here today as well. And there's Tasty, my little Lala friend. And yeah, how is everyone's morning today? Did you get your coffee? If you're a coffee drinker like I am, I love coffee. I can't live without coffee. Did you get your tea today? Today I have genmaicha, which is a roasted green tea. I love it so much. I think it is definitely like one of my top favorite. Actually, yeah, basically my favorite tea, genmaicha. Mm. What do you all like? What are you all drinking today? While listening to my stream, you gotta stay hydrated. I know I have to stay hydrated because I basically read the entire like 2 hours or more. Um, on a little feedback that I got from a little bird yesterday, it said, "Oh, there's Flynn, little Lala Flynn, turned back into a Lala." That's fine. That's totally fine. Anyway, yes, I got a little feedback last night is that I tend to read too fast sometimes. I will explain why I read too fast sometimes. It is 100% because I am too nervous, and I get like if I take a glance at how many viewers I have sometimes, it scares me, just to say the least. It does scare. It does scare me that people are tuning in. But that makes me a bit nervous when I read too fast. So today I'm going to try my very very best to read as not slow, but in a good pace. That so that you can actually understand each and every word that I'm enunciating, and also understand the story that I'm telling. Another feedback that I got the other day was that I pause too often whenever there are new visitors. Therefore, I do that because I want to be polite and not be like, not be grateful that people are tuning into my stream. But I think I do that too often, like every single one who come into my stream, and oh, I would be like reading halfway, and then I'll be like, oh, hey, hi to this person and all that. That interrupts the story flow, and it would put the listener slash reader off the story. Therefore, for today, unless I'm taking a hydration break, I will not be stopping to greet anyone. That is a bit unfortunate, but when I'm taking my hydration break, I will greet the people who just came into my stream or just came into my venue, basically. So, apologies in advance that if you come into to my venue, if I didn't greet you, it's not because I'm being stuck up or anything like that. It's because I think for the sake of the story, I should not be doing that too often. So I'm going to leave that task of greeting new visitors to the venue to my manager, DN. So, um, yeah. So, do leave me any advice or comments on my stream chat. Uh, and I would appreciate it if you guys would leave the, yeah. But you are my manager. Dian, by the way, every time you want to alert me for hydration, can you give me a Borpa spin? You know, my favorite emote. So yeah, I think yeah, I would appreciate if you guys would leave like any comments or anything you want to say on my stream chat uh as you are listening in. Yeah. Yeah, do that one and then say hydrate basically. I will try my best to like take a glance to my side monitor to remember to hydrate every 20 minutes or so. Yeah, I think 20 minutes would be fine. Because if I do it too often, then it will break the flow of the story. Yeah. So we have a little bit about less than 3 minutes to start the reading. Uh, Good morning, Flynn. How are you today? Good morning, Wine Addict. I'm very surprised to not see Tatamina here. Tatamina is always here on time, but I think she might be busy. Yeah. I hope you all will enjoy the story. It is one of the nuance of like Natsume Sōseki stories is like it sounds so mundane when you listen to it, but it has so much like um human being observation in it, and like human being behaviors or even cats behaviors explained in ways that like it doesn't quite make sense, however, still kind of like I don't know. I really like Natsume Soseki's novel. Yeah. When we finish I Am a Cat, I'm going to read I already planned a book, a little shorter one. It's a compilation of short stories, also by Natsume Soseki. But after that, maybe we will read another author's book. I haven't decided yet. But the next one will be a Natsume Soseki's book as well. I hope you all don't mind it. He is definitely my favorite author of all time. And cool. I think it's about time that we're gonna start. I'm going to take a quick hydration and then we're gonna start at 10 past 10. Today we are reading Natsume Soseki's I Am a Cat, Volume 2, Chapter 3. This heat is quite oh my god, I already fucked that up. I'm sorry. I'm so nervous. Okay. Today we are reading Natsume Soseki's I Am a Cat, Volume 2, Chapter 3. This heat is quite unbearable, especially for a cat. An English clergyman, a certain Sydney Smith, once remarked that the weather was so intolerably hot that there was nothing left for it but to take off his skin and sit about in his bones. Though to be reduced to a skeleton might be going too far, I would at least be glad to slip out of my fur of spotted palish gray and send it to be washed or even popped temporarily into pawn. To human eyes, the feline way of life may seem both extremely simple and extremely inexpensive. For a cat, For a cat's face looked the same all year round, and we wear the same old only suit through each of the 4 seasons. But cats, I can assure you, just like anyone else, feel the heat and feel the cold. There are times when I consider that I really wouldn't mind, just at once, soaking myself in a bath, but if I got hot water all over my fur, it would take ages to get dry again, and that's why I always grin and bear the stink of my own sweat, and have never all in my life yet passed through the entrance of a public bathhouse. Every now and then I think about using a fan, but since I cannot hold one in my paws, the thought not worth pursuing. Compared with our simplistic style, human manners are indeed extravagant. Some things should be eaten either raw or as they are, but humans go quite unnecessarily out of their way to waste both time and energy on boiling them, grilling them, pickling them in vinegar, and smarming them over with bean paste. The horrible result of all these processes appear to tickle them to death. In matter of dress, they are similarly absurd, inasmuch as they are born imperfect. It might be asking too much if one expected them to wear, as is the custom of cats, the same clothes all year long. Surely to goodness, they cannot need to swaddle their skins in such heterogeneity of sheer clobber, since it seems not to shame them to be indebted to sheep, to be dependent on silkworm, and even to accept the charity of cotton shrubs, one could not almost assert that their extravagance is an admission of incompetence. Even if one overlooks their oddity and allows them their perversities in matters of food and clothing, I completely fail to see why they have to exhibit the same crass idiosyncrasy in matter that have no bearing whatsoever on their continuing existence. Take, for instance, their hair. Since willy-nilly it grows, I would have thought it simplest and best for any creature just to leave it alone. But no, not for humans. Totally unnecessarily, they trick themselves out in every conceivable sort of kind of hairdo, and even take pride in their idiot variations. Those who call themselves priests keep their heads clean shaven blue, blue in summer, winter blue. Yet when it's hot, they put on sun hats. When it's cold, they hood themselves in bits of blankets. Given all this hatting and hooding, why do they shave their heads? It's absolutely senseless. Again, there are some who, using a saw-like instrument called a comb, pat their hair down in the middle and look as pleased as Punch with the result. Others rake out an artificial separation of the hairs 3/7 of the way across the cranial bones, and some of those extend their scrape division right over the top of their skulls so that the hair flops out at the back like the false banana leaves. Some have their hair on their crowns shorn flat but cut the hair at the sides, both left and right, to hang down straight. This creation of a square frame for a round head made them look as if can be said to look like anything, as though they were staring out on the world through a cedar hedge just trimmed by a maniac gardener. In addition to these styles, there are those based on cutting every hair to a standard length, the 5-inch cut, 3-inch cut, and then the 1-inch cut. Who knows? If such close cropping is continued, they'll finish up with a cut inside their skull. Maybe the -1-inch cut, even a -3-inch cut, will be the ultimate fashion. Even in any event, I cannot understand why mankind become enslaved to such full fads. Why, for instance, do they use 2 legs when they all have 4 available? Such waste of natural resources. If they use 4 legs to get about, they will all be great deal nipper. Nevertheless, they persist in the folly of using only 2 and leave the other pair just hanging from their shoulders like a couple of dried cod fish that someone brought around as a present. One can only deduce that human beings, having so very much spare time, do cats lighten their natural boredom by putting their minds to thinking up such nonsense. The odd thing is not simply that these creatures of endless leisure assure each other, whenever 2 of them get together, of just how busy they are, but their faces do in fact look busy. Indeed, they look fast. That's one wonders just how many men get eaten by their business. I sometimes hear them say, when they do have the good fortune to make my acquaintance, how nice and easy life could be if one lived it like a cat. If they really want their lives to be nice and easy, it's already in their good power to make them so. Nothing stands in the way. Nothing insists that they should fuss about as they do. It is entirely of their own free will that they make more engagements than they can possibly keep and then complain about being so horribly busy. Men build themselves red hot fires, shouldn't complain of the heat. Even we cats, if we had to think up 20 different ways of scissoring our fur, would not for long remain as carefree as we are. Anyone who wants to be carefree must train themselves to be, like me, able to wear fur coat in the summer. Still, I must admit, it is a little hot. Really, it is too hot. A fur coat in the summer. In this appalling heat, I can't even get that afternoon nap, which is my sole and special pleasure. How shall then I while the time away? Since I have long neglected my study of human society, I thought I might usefully devote a few hours to watching them toiling and moiling away in their usual freakish fashions. Unfortunately, my master's character, at least in the matter of napping, is more than a little alluroid. He takes his afternoon siestas no less seriously than I do, and since the summer holidays began he has not done a stroke of what humans would call work. Thus, however closely I may observe him, I should learn nothing new about the human condition. If only someone like Waverhouse would drop in, then there would be some chance of a twitch in my master's depressingly dyspeptic skin, some hope of him stirring his cat-like languor. Just as I was thinking it is indeed about time that Waverhouse dropped by, I hear the sound of somebody splashing in the bathroom, and it's not just splashing water that I hear, for the splasher punctuates his aquatics with loud expressions of appreciation. Perfect! How wonderfully refreshing! One more bucketful, please, if you please. The voice rings bashfully through the house. There's only one man in the world who would speak so loudly and would make himself unbidden so very much in my master's dwelling. It must, thank God, be Waverhouse. I was just thinking, well, at least today I shall be eased of half the long day's tedium. When the man himself walked straight into the living room, his shoulders recovered beneath kimono sleeves, his wiping sweat from his face, without any ceremony at all, he pitches his hat down on the matting and calls out, "Hello there! Tell me, Mrs. Neese, how's your husband bearing up today?" Mrs. Neese had been comfortably asleep in the next room, hunkered down on her knees with her gormless face bent over onto her sewing box. She was shocked awake as Waverhouse yelpings pierced deep into her ears. When, trying to lever her sleepy eyes wide open, she came into the room, Waverhouse, already seated in his fine linen kimono, was happily fanning himself. "Good afternoon," she says, still looking somewhat confused, almost shyly adds, "I had no idea you were here." As she bowed in greeting, a bit of sweat glistenes together at the tip of her nose. "I've only this minute arrived. With your servant's kind assistance, I've just been having a most splendid shower in the bathroom. As a result, I now feel greatly refreshed. Hot though, isn't it?" "Very hot. These last few days been perspiring even when sitting still. But you look as well as ever." Mrs. Neese has not yet wiped the sweat drop from her nose. "Thank you. Yes, I am. Our usual spells of heat hardly affect me at all, but this recent weather has been something special. One can't help but feel sluggish." "How very true. I've never before felt the need of a nap, but in this weather, being so very hot." "You had a nap? That's good. If one could only sleep through the daytime and still sleep at night, why, nothing could be more wonderful." As always, he rattles along the mood of the moment takes him. He seems, however, this time faintly dissatisfied with what's popped out of his mouth, for he hurries to add, "Take me, for example. By nature I need no sleep. Consequently, when I see a man like Sneeze, who is invariably sleeping whenever I call, I feel distinctly envious. Well, I expect such heat is pretty tough on a dyspeptic. On days like this, even a healthy person feels too tired to balance his head on his shoulders. However, since one's head is fixed tight, one can't just wrench it off." Rather unusually, Waverhouse seems uncertain what to do with his head. "Now you, Mrs. Neese, with all that hair on your head, don't you find it hard even to sit up? The weight of your chignon alone must leave you aching to lie down." Mrs. Neese, thinking that Waver House is referring again to her nap by drawing attention to her disordered hair, giggles with embarrassment. Touching her hand to her hair, she mumbles, "How unkind you are!" Waver House, totally unconscious of her reaction, goes off on a tangent. "Do you know," he says, "yesterday I tried to fry an egg on the roof." "How's that?" "The roof tiles were so marvelously baking hot that I thought it's a pity not to make a practical use of them. So I buttered up a tile and broke an egg onto it." Gracious me! But the sun, let me down. Even though I waited for ages, the egg was barely half done. So I went downstairs to read the newspapers. Then a friend dropped in, and somehow I forgot about the egg. It was only this morning that I suddenly remembered, and thinking it must be done by now, went up to take a look at it. How was it? Far from being ready to eat, it had gone completely runny. In fact, it had run away all the way to the side of the house. "Oh dear!" Mrs. Neese frowned to show she was impressed. "But isn't it strange that all through the hot season the weather was so cool, and then it should turn so hot now?" "Yes, indeed. Right up until recently we have been shivering in our summer clothes, and then quite suddenly, the day before yesterday, this awful heat began. Crabs walk sideways, but this year's weather walks backward. Maybe it's trying to teach us the truth that the Chinese saying that sometimes it is reasonable to act contrary to reason." "Come again?" says Mrs. Neese, who's not so much on Chinese proverbs. "It was nothing. The fact that the way this weather is retrogressing is really just like Hercules' bull." Carried away on the tide of his crankiness, Waverhouse starts making ever more odd remarks. Inevitably, my master's wife, marooned in ignorance, is left behind as Waverhouse drifts off beyond the horizons of her comprehension. However, having so recently burnt her fingers over the bit of unreasonable Chinese reason, she was not out looking for further scorching. So, "Oh," she says, and sits silent. Which doesn't, of course, suit Waverhouse. He hasn't gone to the trouble of dragging the Hercules bull not to be asked about it. "Mrs. Neese," he says, driven to the direct question. "Do you know about Hercules' bull?" "No," she says, "I don't." "Ah, well, if you don't, shall I tell you about it?" Since she hardly can ask him to shut up. "Please do," she answers. "One day in ancient times, Hercules was leading a bull along." This Hercules, was he some sort of a cowherd? "Oh no, not a cowherd. Indeed, he's neither a cowherd nor yet the owner of a chain of butcher shops. In those far days there were in fact no butcher shops in Greece." "Ah, so it's a Greek story. You should have told me from the start." At least Mrs. Neese has shown that she knows that Greece is the name of a country. "But I mentioned Hercules, didn't I? Is Hercules another name for Greece?" "Well, Hercules was a Greek hero." "No wonder I didn't know his name. Well, what did he do?" "Like you, dear lady, he felt sleepy. And in fact, he fell asleep." "Really, Mr. Waverhouse?" "And while he slept, along came Vulcan's son." Now, who's this Vulcan feller? Vulcan was a blacksmith, and his son. Sorry, Vulcan was a blacksmith, and his son stole Hercules' bull, but in a rather special way. Can you guess what he did? He dragged the bull off by its tail. Well, when Hercules woke up, he began searching for his bull and bellowing, "Bull, where are you?" But he couldn't find it, and he couldn't track it down, because you see, the beast had been hauled off backward, so there weren't any hoof marks pointing to where it had gone. Pretty smart, don't you agree? For a blacksmith's son. Dragged off by his own tail, Waverhouse had already forgotten that he had been discussing the unseasonable heat. Unseasonable heat. It's time for hydration. One moment, please. And it is time to greet my very, very honorable guest this morning. Hello, hello, hello. I know that Rico was the first one to arrive just now. I mean, not the first one, but amongst the new guests, definitely. And then Freya, thank you for attending my reading session. And then, of course, Tatsamina-san, you are the loveliest pink lady. And of course, Power Exia, thank you so much for attending my little reading session. And those who are in my Twitch channel right now listening in, thank you so very much for attending this reading session, I'm sorry. I do get confused of myself sometimes. Yes. Okay. A little bit more of a hydration and I shall continue the story. Just give me one more second. Oh, and thank you so much, WPP4869, for the follow. I assume this is Axia. Thank you so much for the follow. I really appreciate it. Thank you so very, very much. Thank you. It's okay. I don't think Rico is sleeping. I think Rico is just relaxing while listening to the story, and it's completely fine. I'm back. You know, while I'm reading the story right now, my cat is sleeping on my bed, stretching his arms out by the window and just enjoying the morning sun. And I think to myself, he must think that I'm such a lazy person while he's doing something really important right now. I'm wondering what my cat is thinking about me right now. Huh. Curious, right? You know? Alrighty, let us continue our story. Let me find a good angle. There you go. By the way, he rattled on, what's your husband doing? Taking his usual nap? When such nodding offs are mentioned in Chinese poetry, they happen day in, day out, and the whole concept became vulgarized. He has reduced an eternal elegance of life to a daily form of fragmentary death. Forgive my asking you. He brings his speech to a sudden conclusion. But please do go and wake him up. Mrs. Nee seems to agree with the Waverhouse view of naps. as a form of piecemeal perishing, for as she gets to her feet, she says, "Indeed, he's pretty far gone. Of course, it's bad for his health, especially right on top of his lunch." Talking about lunch, in fact, is I have had I have not had mine yet. Waverhouse drops his broad hints composedly, magnanimously, as though they were pearls of wisdom. "Oh, I'm sorry. I never thought of it. It's lunchtime, of course. Uh, well, would you perhaps like some rice, pickles, seaweed, things like that, and a little hot tea?" "No, thanks. I can manage without them." "Well, as we hadn't realized you would be honoring us today, we have nothing special we can offer you." "Not unnaturally," Mrs. Neese responds with an edge of sarcasm, which is all quite wasted on Waverhouse. "No, and indeed no," he imperturbably replies. "Neither the hot tea nor with heated water. On my way here, I ordered a lunch to be sent to your house, and that's what I'm going to eat." In the most matter-of-fact manner, Waverhouse states his quite outrageous action. Mrs. Neese said, "Oh!" but in one gasp some three separate "ohs" were mingled with her "oh" with a blank surprise. Her "oh" is piqued annoyance, and her "oh" of gratified relief. At which moment my master comes tottering in from the study. He had just begun to doze off into sleep when it became so unusually noisy that he was hauled back into consciousness, like something being scraped against his natural grain. "You're a rowdy feller," he grumbled sourly through his yawns. "Always the same, just when I was getting off to sleep, feeling so pleasant and relaxed." "Aha! So you are awake. I am extremely sorry to have disturbed your heavenly repose, but missing it just once a while may do you good. Please come and be seated." Waverhouse makes himself an agreeable host to my master in my master's house. My master sits down without a word, and taking a cigarette from a box of wooden crazy work, he begins to puff at it. Then, happening to notice the hat which Waverhouse had tossed away into a corner, he observed, "I see you have bought a hat. What do you think of it?" Waverhouse fetches it and holds it proudly out for the sneezes to inspect. "Oh, how pretty! It's very closely woven. It's so soft." Mrs. Sneeze strokes it almost greedily. "This hat, dear lady, is a handy hat, and as an obedient man could wish. Look." He clenched his hand into a knobby fist and drove it sharply into the side of his precious Panama. A fist-shaped dent remained, but before Mrs. Neese could finish her gasp of surprise, Waverhouse whipped his hand inside the hat, gave it a sharpish shove, and the hat popped back into shape. He then grabs the hat by opposite sides of its brim and squashed it flat, as though beneath a rolling pin. Then sorry, he rolled it up, one mighty roll like a straw mat hat, finally saying, "Didn't I say it was handy?" We tucked it away into the breastfold of his kimono. "How extraordinary!" Mrs. Neese marvels as if she was watching that the master magician Kitensai Soichi performing one of his most dazzling sleights of hand. Waverhouse himself appears to be bitten by the spirit of his own act, for, producing from his left-hand sleeve of the tube of hat he thrusts into the breast of his kimono, he announces, not a scratch upon it, He then bats the head back into its original shape and sticking his forefinger into its crown, spins it like a conjurer's blade. I thought the act was over, but Waverhouse proceeded neatly to flip his whirling headgear through over his head and onto the floor behind him, where, as the climax of his performance, he sat down squarely on it with a heavy, solid whomp. You sure it's all right? Even my master looked somewhat concerned. Mrs. Nee's genuinely anxious squeaks, "Please, you'd better stop. It would be terrible to spoil so fine a hat." Only its owner wants to keep going. But it can't be spoiled. That's the wonder of it. He heaves the crumpled object from under his bottom and jams it on his head. It sprang back into shape. Indeed, it's a very strong hat. Isn't it extraordinary? Quite amazing. Mrs. Neese is more and more impressed. Oh, there's nothing extraordinary about it. It's just that kind of hat, says Waverhouse, smirking out from under its brim. A moment later, Mrs. Neese turned to her husband. "I think you too had better buy a hat like that." "But he's already got a splendid boater. Just the other day the children trampled on it, and it's all squashed out of shape," Mrs. Neese persists. "Oh dear, that's a pity. That's why I think he should buy a hat like yours, strong and splendiferous." He has no idea what a Panama hat can cost, so nothing moderates the urgency of her proddings. "Really, my dear, you must get one just like this." At this point, Waverhouse produces from his right sleeve a pair of scissors in scarlet sheath. "Mrs. Neese," he says, "forget the hat for a moment. Take a look at these scissors. They too are fantastically handy. You can use them in 14 different ways. If it hadn't been for those scissors, my masters would have succumbed to wifely pressure. The matter of the hat." He was extremely lucky that the inborn female sense of curiosity diverted his wife's attention. It crossed my mind that Waverhouse had acted of intent, helpfully and tactfully, but after careful consideration I have concluded that it was pure good luck that saved my master from painful outlay on a Panama hat. No sooner has Mrs. Neese responded with a "What are 14 ways?" than Waverhouse is off again in triumphantly full flow. I shall explain each of them, so listen carefully, all right? You see here a crescent-shaped opening? One sticks out like one cigar in here to nip its lip end before smoking. This gadget down here by the handle can cut through wire as if it were a mere noodle. Now, if you put the scissors flat down upon a paper, there is a ruler for you. Here, on the back edge of this blade, there's a scale engraved on the scissors can be used as a measure. Over here, there's a file for one's fingernails, right? Now then, if you push this blade tip out, you can twist it around and around to drive screws. Thus, it serves as a hammer, and you can use this blade tip to lever open the greatest of case, even the most carefully nailed lid. Furthermore, the end of this other blade, being ground to so fine a point, makes an excellent gimlet. With this thing you can scrape out any mistakes in your writing. And finally, if you take the whole thing to pieces, you get a perfectly good knife. Now, Mrs. Neese, there's actually one more especially interesting feature. Here's the handle. There's a tiny ball about the size of a fly, you see? Well, take a peep at it. No, I'd rather not. I'm sure you're gonna make fun of me again. I'm grief that you should have so little confidence in me. But just this once, take me at my word and have a little look. No? Oh, please, just a little quick squint. He handed her the scissors. Mrs. Neese took them very gingerly, setting her eyeball close to the magic spot, does her very best to see it. Well, nothing. It's all black. All black? That won't do. Turn a little toward the paper window and look against the light. Don't tilt the scissors like that. Right, that's it. Now you can see, can you? Oh my! It's a photograph, isn't it? How can a tiny photograph be fixed in here? That's what's so remarkable. Mrs. Neese and Waverhouse are now absorbed in their conversation, my master silent for some time now, but intrigued by the idea of the photograph, seemed suddenly possessed with an urge to see it. He asked his wife to let him, but she, her eyes still glued to the scissors, just babbles on. How lovely! What a beautiful study of the nude! She won't be parted from the scissors. Come on, let me see it. You wait. What lovely tresses, all the way down to her hips. How movingly her face is lifted. Rather a tall girl, I would say, but indeed, what a beauty! Damn it, let me see it. My master, now distinctly marked, flares up at his wife. There you are, then. Gob away to your heart's content. As she was handing the scissors over, the servant trundles in from the kitchen with an announcement that the Waverhouse meal had been delivered. Indeed, she carries with her two lidded bamboo plates loaded with the cold buckwheat noodles. Ah, says Waverhouse. So here, Mrs. Neese, is the lunch I bought myself. With your permission, I propose to eat it now. He bows respectfully, as if he seems to have spoken half in earnest and half in jest. Mrs. Sneeze is now at loss how best to answer, so she just lightly says, "Please do," and settles back to watch. At long last, my master drags his eye away from the photograph and remarks, "In weather as hot as this, noodles are bad for one's health." No danger. What one likes seldom upsets one. In fact, I've heard, says Waverhouse, lifting one of those lids, that a little of what you fancy does you good. He appears satisfied by what he has seen on the plate, for he goes straight on to observe, "In my opinion, noodles that have been left to stand like heavily bearded men never to be relied on." He adds green horseradish to his dish of soy sauce and stirs away like mad. "Steady on," says my master in genuine anxious tone. "If you put in that much spice, it will be too hot to eat. Noodles must be eaten with soy sauce and green horseradish. I bet you don't even like noodles." "I do indeed, the normal kind. That's the stuff for pack horse drivers. A man insensitive to cold buckwheat noodles spiced like this is a man to be devoutly pitied." So, saying, Waverhouse digs his cedar wood chopstick deep into the mass of noodles, scoops up a hefty helping, and lifts it some 2 inches. Did you know, Mrs. Neese, that there are several styles for eating noodles? Ah, it's time for hydration. Hello, Cardinal Daniel. I'm sorry that I missed your follow, but thank you so much for your follow. Thank you so much to the live viewers in my stream right now. Thank you so much for staying here. Good morning, Chloe. Thank you for dropping by. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for staying here in my stream. We are currently, once again, for those who just dropped in, hello, Cardinal Daniel. Hello. Okay, for those who just dropped in this very lovely morning, we are reading Natsume Sosaki's I Am a Cat, Volume 2, Chapter 3, as it says on the title. I don't know why I keep repeating it. But yeah, we are in the midst of reading it right now, and I just took a quick hydration. Um, a break and to just to say hello to Cardinal Daniel and Chloe who just dropped in. And thank you, Cardinal Daniel, for your follow. I really truly appreciate it. Thank you so very, very much. And sorry, I had a little coughing fit. Okay, and now we shall continue our reading. And yes, a very good morning to everyone. Raw beginners always use too much sauce and then they munch on this delicacy like so many cattle chewing the cud. That way, the exquisite savor of the noodles is inevitably lost. The correct procedure is to scoop them up like this. Waverhouse raises his chopstick above the bamboo plate until a foot-long curtain of noodles dangles in the air. He looks down at the plate to check if he has lifted his lading clear of the plate, but finds a dozen or so of the tail ends still lying coiled within it. What a very long noodle! Look, Mrs. Neese, aren't they the longest one you have ever saw? Waverhouse demands that his audience should participate, if only by interjections. Ah, just one quick moment. Uh, for uh, for those who drop by my channel right now, this at this very moment, and especially to Cardinal Daniel, who I assume you found me through Twitch, the game section or something, and to those 11 viewers in my stream right now, thank you very much for staying here and listening to me read. Um, so just a quick a reminder to those who are just new to my stream. I stream every alternate morning at the oh, true party finder. That's super cool. Thank you so much for dropping by. Thank you so much. But yes, just a quick reminder. Um, I stream every alternate mornings at 10 a.m. GMT plus 8 for Nudibles. Nudibles is a play on word on Audibles, which is the reading of one book for listeners. And just one quick moment. Oops, sorry, I got interrupted. Anyway, sorry, I'm so sorry. Um, so yeah, I stream every alternate mornings on Nudibles, 10 a.m. GMT plus 8 every alternate mornings. So for this week, today is a very nice and a beautiful Wednesday. My next one will be on this coming Friday morning. And we currently are reading Natsume Soseki's book. The next one will be a Natsume Soseki's book as well. Um, so just for your information, I stream every alternate days for Nudibles, just especially for Nudibles, the reading session. But I do stream occasionally on like grading content and just gameplay content basically. And uh, today, after this reading session, maybe a little bit later on, we will, Deanne and I and our friends will try to do our re-clears on the weekly re-clears rates. So you will see my rating. So if you're interested in watching rating content, please do stay on. Also, follow me on Twitter because I always alert people when I go live. So thank you so much for staying here with me. I'm so sorry that I paused for so long. I was interrupted by family members. So okay, I'm gonna continue reading right now. I'm so sorry. What very long noodles! Look, Mrs. Neese, aren't they the longest that you ever saw? Waver House demands that his audience should participate, if only by interjections. Indeed, they are lengthy, she answers, as if impressed by his dissertation. Now, you dip 1/3 of these long strands into the sauce, then swallow them in one single gulp. You mustn't chew them. Mastication destroys their unique flavor. The whole point of noodles is the way they slither down one's throat. Here, thereupon, he raises his chopstick to dramatic height, and the ends of the longest strand at last swing clear of the plate. Then, as he starts to lower his arm again, the tail ends of the noodles slowly start submerging into the sauce dish held in his left hand, which, in accordance in Archimedes' law, causes the sauce to slowly rise in the dish as it volumes is displaced by noodles. However, since the dish was originally 8/10 full of sauce, the level of the liquid reached its brim before Waverhouse could get even 1/4, let alone connoisseurs 1/3 of the length of his wriggling noodles into the sauce. The chopsticks appear paralyzed about 5 inches above the dish, and so remain for an awkward pause while Waverhouse considers his dilemma. If he lowers the noodles one more fraction of an inch, the sauce must overflow, but if he does not lower them, he must fail to conform with the standards he has established for the proper style of stuffing oneself with the noodles. No wonder he looks moithered and half hesitates. Then, suddenly, jerking his head and neck forward and down like a striking snake, he jabbed his mouth at the chopsticks. Then was a slushy slurping sound. He throttled, surged, and receded once or twice, and the noodles were gone. A few tears oozes from the corners of his eyes. To this day, I'm not sure whether those teardrops were a tribute to the strength of the green horseradish or evidence of the painful effort of gurgitation must have involved. What an extraordinary performance! How on earth, en- inquires my flabbergasted master, do you contrive to gulp down such a mass of vermicelli in one consuming go? Amazing, isn't he? Mrs. Neese is equally lost in admiration. Waverhouse says nothing, puts down the chopsticks, and pats his chest an easing couple of times. Well, Mrs. Neese, he eventually answers, a plate of noodles should be consumed in 3½ at most 4 mouthfuls. If you drag out the process longer than that, the noodles will not taste their best. He wipes his face with a handkerchief and sits back to take a well-earned breather. At this point, who should walk in but Coal Moon? His feet are soiled with summer dust, but for no reason I can offer. Despite the broiling heat, he's wearing a winter hat. Hello! Here comes our handsome hero. However, since I'm still in the middle of eating, you must excuse me. Waverhouse, totally unabashed, settles down to finishing off the noodles. This time, rather sensibly, he makes no effort to give a repeat performance as a vermicelli virtuoso, and is consequently spared the indignities of needing support from handkerchiefs and breathers between mouthfuls. Eating normally, he empties both bamboo plates in matter of minutes. Coleman says, "My master, how's your thesis going along?" And Waverhouse adds, "Since the delectable Miss Schofield is yearning to be yours, you should in common kindness submit the finished text as fast as possible." Coleman breaks as usual into his disconcertingly idiot grin. "Inasmuch as waiting is a cruelty to her, I would like to indeed finish it quickly," he replies, "but the nature of its subject is such that a great deal of drudging research is unavoidable." He spoke with measured seriousness of things he couldn't possibly himself be taking seriously. "Quite so," says Waverhouse, adopting Coleman's style with contrapuntal skill. "The subject being what it is, naturally, it cannot be handled just as Coleman wishes. Nevertheless, the nasality of her mother being the snorter that she is, naturally, it would be prudent to trim one's sails to the way she blows." The only relatively sensible comment comes from my master. "What did you say was the subject of your thesis?" "It is entitled 'The Effects of Ultraviolet Rays upon the Galvanic Action in the Eyeball of the Frog.'" Remarkable. Just as one might expect from Coleman. I like both the rhythm and the substantial originality of that last bit. The electrifying shock in that eyeball of the frog. How about it, Sneeze? Ought we not to inform the Goldfields at least the title before our scholar finishes his paper? My master, disregarding these waggeries from Waverhouse, asked Coleman, "Can such a subject really involve much drudgery of research?" "Oh, yes. It's a complicated question. For one thing, the structure of the lens in the eyeball of the frog is by no means simple. Hundreds, even thousands of experiments will have to be carried out. For a start, I'm planning to construct a round glass ball." "A glass ball? Sure you could find one quite easily in a glass shop." "Oh no, far from it," says Coleman, throwing out his chest a little. "To begin with, things like circles and straight lines are purely geometrical concepts, and neither actual circles nor actual straight lines can, in this imperfect world, ever realize such idealities. If they can ever exist, hadn't you better abandon the attempt to create them?" butts in Waverhouse. "Well, I thought I would begin by making a ball suitable for my experiments, and in fact I started on it on the other day." "Oh, and have you finished it?" asked my master, as if the task were an easy matter. "How could I?" says Coleman, but then, realizing perhaps that he's getting close to self-contradiction, hurries to explain, "It's really frightfully difficult. After I felt it for some time, I noticed that the radius on one side is too long, so I grind it fractionally shorter. But this leads on to trouble, because now I find the radius on the other side excessive, when, with great effort, I grind the excess off, and the entire ball becomes misshapen. After I've at last corrected that distortion, I discover that the diametrical dimensions have, somehow or other, once more gone ugly. The glass ball originally the size of an apple, soon becomes a strawberry, and as I patiently struggle for perfection, it rapidly shrinks to no more than a bean. Even then, it's not a perfect sphere. Believe me, I have striven. I have dedicated my whole life to grinding of glass balls. Since New Year's Day, no less than six of them, admittedly of differing sizes, have melted away to nothing in these hands. He speaks with such rare passion, and no one could say whether or not he's telling the truth. Where do you do this grinding? In the university laboratory, of course. I start grinding in the morning and I take short rest for lunch, then continue grinding until the light fails. It's not an easy job. Do you mean that you go down to the university day after day, including Sundays, just to grind glass balls? Is that what keeps you, as you are always telling us, so inexorably busy? That's correct. At this stage in my studies, I have no choice but to grind glass balls morning, noon, and night. I seem to recall, says Waverhouse, now very much in his element, a kabuki play in which one character gains his end by disguising himself as a gardener. He strikes an attitude and quotes, as I was quickly brought up among civilian non-officials, no one knows my face, so I enter as a cultivator of chrysanthemums. You, Coleman, seems bent on gaining your ends disguised as a cultivator of crystals. For I'm sure that when the master of all noses learns of your ardor, your single-minded dedication to your work, your selfless devotion to the grinding of glass balls, she cannot fail to warm toward you. Incidentally, the other day I had some work to do in the university library, and as I was leaving, I chanced to bump into an old colleague, Narl Thompson, at the door. Thinking it was peculiar, years after his graduation, he should still be using the library, I said to him, "Now, Damson," I said, "I'm most impressed now, Damson, to find you still imbibing at the fount of learning." He gave me a very odd look and explained that, far from wanting to consult a book, he had been caught short as he passed the university and had just popped in for a pee. A curious use for a seat of learning. However, it's just occurred to me that you and Nara Thompson both exemplify, though in contrasting styles, how to use how to misuse a university. You will, of course, have read that Chinese classic which constructed from pairs of parallel anecdotes, one ancient and one modern, about famous men. I am proposing to bring out a new selection along similar lines, and, with your permission, will include therein a short section on glass balls and urinals. One quick moment for hydration. Hello, Ariana. Oh my god. Oh, from raiding to watching me read. Thank you so much, Ariana. And Cardinal. Hey, Cardinal. There you are, little bunny boy. Thank you so much for being here with me. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. You guys are awesome, by the way. Really awesome. Let me get a good angle. Alright. Don't burn your feet, Ariana. Very dangerous. Fire. Okay. Let us continue. My master, however, took a more serious view of the matter. It's all very well, he said, to pass your day frothing away at glass, but when do you expect to finish your thesis and get your doctorate? At my present rate of progress, maybe in 10 years. Moon seems far less concerned than my master about the doctorate. 10 years, eh? I think you'd better bring your grinding to a halt rather sooner than that. 10 years is an optimistic estimate. It could very well take me 20 years. That's terrible. You can't then hope for a doctorate for a long time. No, of course. I would be only too happy to get it quickly. So set the young lady's mind at rest. But I've got the glass ball properly ground. I can't even launch out on my first experiment. Coleman's voice trailed off into silence as though his mind was staring into the lens of a frog's eyeball. But after a brief pause, he continued, "There's no need, to get so worried about it. The Goldfields are fully aware that I do nothing but grind away at these balls. As a matter of fact, I gave them a fairly detailed explanation when I saw them just a few days back." He smiled in quiet complacence. Mrs. Neese, who, though hardly understanding a word of it, has been listening to the three men's conversation, interjects in a puzzled voice. "But the whole Goldfield family has been away at the seaside at Oiso since last month." This flummoxes even Coleman, but he maintains pretense of innocence. "How very odd," he says. "I can't understand it. There are occasions when Waver House fulfills a useful social function, when a conversation flags, when one is embarrassed, when one becomes sleepy, when one is troubled. Then on all other occasions, Waver House can be relied upon to have something immediate and diverting to say. To have met someone a few days back in Tokyo who had gone to Oiso last month is engagingly mysterious. It is an example, is it not, of the exchange of soul. Such a phenomenon is likely to occur when the sentiment of requited love is particularly poignant. When one hears of such happening, it sounds like a dream, but even if it is a dream, it is a dream more actual than reality. For someone like you, Mrs. Neese, who were married to Sneeze, not because you loved him or because he loved you, life has never given an opportunity for you to understand the extraordinary nature of love. So it is only natural that you should find odd the disparities you mention. I don't know why you should say such nasty things. Why are you always getting at me like that?" Mrs. Neese round snappishly on Waverhouse. "What's more, you yourself don't look like a man who has experience of pangs of love." My master brings up reinforcements in surprising support of the frontline position manned by his wife. "Well, since all my love affairs were over long before 9 days back that might have made them wonders, you doubtless don't remember them. But it remains a fact that it was a disappointment in love that has made me to this day a lonely bachelor." Waverhouse leveled a steady look upon each of his listeners, one after another. It was Mrs. Neese who laughed, though she added, "But how very interesting." My master said, "Bosh," and turned to stare into the garden. Cold Moon, though he grinned, said politely, I would like for my own future benefit to hear the story of your ancient love. My story too contains elements of mysterious, so much so that if he were not lamentably dead, it must have moved the interest of the Lafcadio Hearn. I am, I must confess, a little reluctant to tell this painful tale, but since you insist, I will confide in all of you on the sole condition that you listen very carefully to the very end. They promised, and he started. As well as I can recollect, it was. How many years ago was it? I wonder. Never mind. Let's just say it was maybe 15 or 16 years ago. Incorrigible, snorts my master. You do have a very poor memory, don't you, Mr. Waverhouse? Mrs. Neese puts in a jabbing oar. Cold Moon is the only person who, keeping the promise, says nothing, but wears the expression of a man eagerly waiting for the remainder of a story. Anyway, it was in the winter some years back, having passed through the valley of the bamboo shoots at Kambara in Echigo. I was climbing through the pass of the octopus trap on my way to the Aizu territory. What odd name places! My master interrupts again. Oh, do keep quiet and listen. This is getting interesting. Mrs. Neese reins back her husband. Unfortunately, it was getting dark. I lost my way. I was hungry. So in the end, I was obliged to knock at the door of a hut way up in the middle of the pass. Explaining my predicament, I begged for a night's lodging. And do you know, the minute that I saw the face of the girl who thrusting a lit candle out toward me answered, Of course, please enter. My whole body began to tremble. Since that moment, I've been very acutely conscious of supernatural power of blind force we call love. Fancy that, says Mrs. Neese. Are there really, I wonder, many beautiful girls living up there in those God-forsaken mountains? It hardly matters that I found her in the mountains. It might just as well have been beside the seaside. But oh, Mrs. Neese, would that you have seen her. Only at a glance she wore her hair in high dress fashion for a marriageable girl. Mrs. Neese, rendered speechless by the wonder of it all, gives a vent to a long-drawn sigh. On entering the hut, I found a big fireplace sunk in the center of an 8-mat room, and soon the four of us, the girl, her grandfather, her grandmother, and myself, were sitting comfortably around it. They said I must be very hungry, and I was, very, so I asked for some food. Anything, no matter what, so long as I might have it quickly, the old man said. It's seldom we have visitors, so let's prepare snake rice in honor of our guest. Now then, this is where I come to the story of my disappointment in love, so listen carefully. Of course, we'll listen carefully, says Coleman. But I find it hard to believe that even out in the wilds of Echigo there are snakes around in the winter. Well, that's a fair observation, but in a romantic story such as this, one shouldn't be too scrupulous over the logic of its details. Why, in one of Kyoka's novels, you'll find crabs crawling out in the snow. I see, says Coleman, who thereupon resumed his serious attitude of listening. In those days, I was outstandingly capable, really in the champion of class of eating ugly foods, but being more or less wearied of locusts, slugs, red frogs, and such like. I thought snake rice sounded like a welcome change. So I told the old man I would be delighted. Then he set a pot on the fire and put some rice in it. Slowly it began to cook. The only oddity was that there were about 10 holes of various size of the lid of the pot. Through these holes the steam came puffing up. I was really fascinated by the effect, and I remember thinking how ingenious these country people were. Just then the old man suddenly stood up and went out of the hut, and a while later he came back with a large basket under his arm, and when he put it casually down beside the hearth, I took a look inside. Well, there they were, snakes, all of them, long ones, coiled up tight, as Coleman would appreciate in their winter torpor. "Please stop talking about such nasty things. It's quite revolting," says Mrs. Needs with a girlish shudder. "Oh, I can't possibly stop, for all these matters lies at the bottom of my broken-heartedness." Well, by and by, the old man lifted the pot's lid with his left hand, while the other he nimbly grabbed a wad of snakes from the basket. He threw them into the pot and popped the lid back on. And I must admit that, though I am neither squeamish nor particularly scared of snakes, the old man's nonchalant action did, at that moment, leave me gasping. "Oh, please do stop. I can't stand gruesome stories." Mrs. Neese is quite actually frightened. "Very soon now I'll be coming to the broken-hearted bit, so please just do be patient." Well, barely a minute had passed on. To my great surprise, a snake's head popped out of the hole in the lid. I had barely realized what it was before another one popped his face out from a neighboring hole. I had barely registered a second before another and another and another erupted into view, until the whole lid was studded with snakes' faces. "Why did they stick their heads out?" asked my master. "Because in agony they were trying to crawl away from the heat building up inside the pot." After a while the old man said, speaking naturally in his local dialect, something like, "Right then, give them the old heave-ho." His wife said, "Aye," and the girl said, "Yes," and each of them, grasping a snake's head firmly, gave it a savage yank. While the flesh remained in the pot, the head and a length of bone came waggling free in their hands. "What you might call bone snake?" asked Coleman with a laugh. "Yes, indeed, boned, or even spineless. But wasn't it all exceedingly clever? They lifted the lid, took a ladle, stirred the rice and the snake flesh into one great wonderful mishmash, and then invited me to tuck in." "Did you actually eat it?" asked my master in a slightly edgy sort of voice. His wife, make a sour face, grumblingly complains, "I do so wish you would stop talking about it. I'm feeling sick right now down to my stomach, and I shan't dare to eat for days." "You would only say that, Mrs. Neese, because you never had the luck to taste snake rice. But if you tried it once, you would never forget its exquisite flavor." "Never! Nothing on earth could induce me to touch the nasty stuff. Anyway, I dined well. I forgot the bitter cold, and I studied the girl's face to my heart's content, and though I could happily stare at her forever, they suggested that I should go to sleep. I remember I was in fact dog-tired from my traveling, so I took their advice and laid down. And before long everything blurred and I was fast asleep. And what happened then? This time, it's Mrs. Neese who urges him to continue. When I woke up the next morning, the heartache had set in. Did anything happen to you? Asked Mrs. Neese. No, nothing special happened to me. I just woke up, and while I was smoking a cigarette, I chanced to look out through the back window, and there I saw, washing its face in the water flowing from the bamboo pipe, someone as bald as a kettle. The old man? Asked my master. Or the old woman? At first I couldn't tell. I sat there watching it in vague distaste for quite some time, and when at last the kettle turned towards me, I got the shock of my life, for it was the girl to whom I had already lost my heart. But you said earlier that she wore her hair in the style of a marriageable girl, my master promptly objects. The night before, unmitigated beauty; in the morning, unmitigated cattle. Really, what a balderdash would you trot out next? As is usual when he feels put out, my master stares at the ceiling. Naturally, I was most deeply shocked, even a little frightened, but making myself inconspicuous, I continued to watch. At long last, the kettle finished washing its face, featly donned the wig, waiting on a nearby stone, and then came tripping primly back to the hut. I understood everything, but though I understood, I have from that moment man, been a man incurably, sorry. But though I understood, I have from that moment been a man incurably wretched, a man with a broken heart. The silliest broken heart that ever was. Observe, my dear Coleman, how gay and lively he contrived to be, despite his broken heart. Turning to Coleman, my master registers his low opinion of his friend's disastrous love affair. But, says Coleman, if the girl had not been bald, and if Waverhouse had brought her back with him to Tokyo, he might now be livelier than he is. The fact remains that it's infinitely pitiable that the young lady happened to be bald. But tell me, Waverhouse, how did it come about that a girl so young should have lost her hair? Well, naturally, I've thought about that too, and I'm certain now that the depilation must be due entirely to overindulgence of snake rice. It goes to the head, you know. It drives the blood upward, damaging the capillaries of the follicle in the head. I'm so glad nothing so terrible happened to you, says Mrs. Neese with an undertone of sarcasm. It is true that I was spared in the affliction of going bald, but instead, as you can see, I have become a presbyope. Taking off his gold-rimmed spectacles, he polishes them carefully with his pocket handkerchief. There was a short silence. To be a presbyope sounded so awful that none dared for an explanation. But my master, possibly being made so sterner stuff, possibly because he knows that nearsightedness is more often caused by the passing of years than by one night's meal of snake rice, was not yet done. I seem to remember, he eventually said, that you mentioned some mystery that would have moved the interest of Lafcadio Hearn. What mystery? Did she buy the wig or simply pick it up? And if she picked it up, where? That, and Waverhouse placing his spectacle on his nose, is the mystery to this day I cannot work out. It's just like listening to a comic storyteller, says Mrs. Neese. As Waverhouse's improbable tale had come to its conclusion, I thought he might shut up. But no, he appears by nature incapable of keeping quiet unless actually gagged. for he is at it again already. But disappointment in love caused a bitter experience. But had I married that heavenly girl in ignorance of cattledom, the matter would have remained a lifelong cause of friction. One has to be careful. In matters like marriage, one tends only to discover at the very last moment hidden defects in unexpected places. I therefore advise you, Coleman, not to waste your youth in futile yearnings or in pointless despair, but to keep on grinding away at your balls of glass with an easy mind and heart. I'll be happy, answers Coleman, to do nothing more. However, the goldfields lady, to my considerable botheration, do keep on at me. He grimaces in exaggerated annoyance. True, you are, in your case, somewhat put upon, but there are many comic cases of people thrusting themselves forward to invite the disquiet. Take, for example, the case of Narl Damson, that well-known peddler upon seats of learning. His was extremely odd. What did he do? Asked my master, entering the swing of the conversation. Well, it was like this. Once a long, long time ago, he stayed at the East-West Inn in Shizuoka, just for one night, mind you. And that same evening he offered marriage to one of the servant girls working there. I myself am pretty easy-going, but I would not find it easy to go as far as that. The fact was that in those days one of the maids in that inn, they called her Summer, was a raving beauty, and it just so happened that she looked after Nar Damson's room, so he could not help but meet her. The meeting was no doubt fated, just like yours in something or other past, observed my master. Yes, there is some resemblance between the cases. Indeed, there are obvious similarities between Nar Damson and myself. Anyway, he proposed to this summer girl, but before she gave her answer, he felt a need for watermelon. Oh, thank you for the reminder. Thank you for the reminder. Oh, my cat is also reading my book with me. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Again, this is. Huh? My master looks puzzled, and not only he, for both his wife and Coleman cocked their heads sideways as they tried to see the connection. Waverhouse disregards them with all and proceeds blithely with his story. He summoned the girl and asked her if one could get a watermelon in Shizuoka. She replied that though the town was not as up to date as Tokyo, even in Shizuoka watermelons could be had, and almost immediately she brought him a tray of heaped high with slices of the fruit. So, while waiting for her answer, Now Damson scoffed a lot, but before she gave the answer, Now Damson got the gripes. He groaned away like mad, but since that didn't help, he summoned the girl again and this time asked if there was a doctor available. The girl replied that though the town was not as up to date as Tokyo, still, in even Shizuoka, doctors were available, and in a matter of minutes she ushered one into his room. The doctor, incidentally, had a very odd name, something like Heaven and Earth. Anyway, something obviously cribbed for the effect from the Chinese classics. Well, next morning, when Now Damson woke up, he was to find his gut ache gone, and some 15 minutes before he was due to leave, he again summoned the summer girl and asked for her answer to his proposal of marriage. The girl replied with a laughter. She said that down in Shizuoka it is possible to find a doctor and melons at a very short notice, but that even in Shizuoka, few brides in a single night. She turned and went out of the room, and that was the last she saw of her. And ever since that day, Nar Damson has remained like me, a man scarred by a disappointment in love. What a pussy. Oh my god. Sorry. I'm sorry, I'm evil. Oh, the first thing that came out of my mind is what a fucking pussy and an incel that was. Oh shit. Oh, wow, I'm an asshole. 1 second. Quick hydration. Alright, I'm back from my laughing fit. Sorry. Okay. Almost a recluse, he'll only go to a library when pressed there by his bladder, which all goes to show how the which all goes to show the wickedness and cruelty of women. Oh wow, that's I'm sorry, but that's just incel talk, bro. Oh god. Ugh. Books written 100 years ago still has incels to these days. It's very relevant, extremely relevant. Oh my god. I got rejected. It's a woman's fault. Incels. Never mind. Let us continue. My master, most unusually, comes out this time in strong support of Weber's house team. How right you are, he says. How very right. Just the other day, I was reading one of the Master's play in which some character quoted Ovid to the effect that lighter than a feather is dust, then dust, wind, then wind, woman, and then woman, nothing. A very penetrating observation, isn't it? Women are indeed the dreaded end. My master adopts an exceedingly cavalier attitude, but his wife, of course, is not going to let these flourishes pass unchallenged. You complain about women being light, but I can't see any particular merit in the fact that men are heavy. What do you mean by heavy? Heavy is heavy, like you. Why did you say that I'm heavy? Because you are very heavy. Very heavy. They are off on one of their crazy arguments again. For a time, Waverhouse just sits there, listening with an amusement to their increasingly bitter bickering, but eventually he opens his mouth. The way you two go on at each other, hammering away until you are red in the face, is perhaps the clearest possible demonstration that you truly are husband and wife. I am inclined to think that marriage in the old day was less a meaningful thing than it is today. None of his listeners could tell whether he was teasing or complimenting his host, and host and hostess, but since their bickering was halted, he could with profit have just stopped there. But that's not the way of Weaver House, who always has more to say. I hear that in the old days, no woman would have dreamt of answering back to her husband. From the man's point of view, it must have been so like marriage to a deaf mute. I wouldn't have liked that. Not one little bit. I certainly prefer women like you, Mrs. Nees. Have the spirit to retort, because you are heavy, or something else in the same reign. If one is to be married, it would be insupportably boring never to have the liveliness of an occasional spat. My mother, for instance, spent her whole life saying, "Yes, you are right," to my frequently foolish father. She lived with him 20 or so assenting years, and in all that stretch she never set foot outside the house except to go to a temple. Really, it's too pitiful. There were, of course, advantages. Thus, my mother has the enormous satisfaction of knowing that she knows by heart she sorry the enormous satisfaction of knowing that she knows by heart the full posthumous names of all my family ancestors. This hideous sort of relationship did not exist simply between man and wife, but extend to cover the whole range of relations between sexes. When I was a lad, it was quite out of the question for a young man and a young woman even to play music together. There was no such thing as a lovers' meeting. They couldn't even meet in the world of spirit, like Coleman here, by a long-range swap of soul. It must have been awful, says Coleman with a sort of shrinking bow. Indeed it was. One weeps for one's ancestors. Still, women in those days were not necessarily any better behaved than the women of today. You know, Mrs. Nees, people talk down their noses about the depraved conduct of modern girl students, but the truth is that things were very much worse in those so-called good old days. Really? Mrs. Nees is serious. Of course, I'm not just making things up. I can prove what I say. You, Sneeze, will probably remember that when we were maybe 5 or 6, there were women going about in the streets with 2 panniers hanging down from each end of their shoulder posts, and in the panniers, like so many pumpkins, they had little girls for sale. You remember? I don't remember anything of that sort. I don't know how things were in your part of the country, but that's most certainly the way it was in Shizuoka. Surely not, murmurs Mrs. Nees. Do you mean that for a fact? Asks Coleman in a tone of voice that shows that he can't quite credit it. For an absolute rock-hard fact. I can't even remember how once my father haggled over the price of one. I must have been about 6. As my father and I coming out of the street into the main thoroughfare, we saw a man approaching us who was bawling out, "Girls for sales! Girl for sale! Anyone want a baby girl?" When we reached to the corner of the second block in the street, we came face to face with this hawker just in front of the drapers. Isegen's it was. Isegen is quite the biggest draper in Shizuoka, with 60-foot frontage and 5 warehouses. Have a look at it next time you are down there. It's just the same today as it was, quite unaltered. A fine building. The chief clerk is Jimbei, and he sits at his counter with the invariable expression of a man who has lost his mother only 3 days back. Sitting right beside him, beside Jimbei, you'll find a young man of 24, maybe 25, whose name is Hatsu. Hatsu's very pale. He looks like one of those novices who, in demonstration of their devotion to the 33rd priest prince of Shingon sect, take nothing but buckwheat water for 21 days at a stretch. And next to Hatsu there's Chodon. Chodon's the one who's hunched dejectedly above his abacus as though but yesterday he lost his home in a fire. And next to Chodon, "Come off it, Waverhouse," snaps my master. "Is this a chanting of genealogy of your draper, or is it a tale about the maiden mongers of Shizuoka?" "Ah, yes, I was telling you the story of my maiden mongers. As a matter of fact, there's an extremely strange story I was going to tell you about the drapers, but I'll cut it out and concentrate on the sellers of the little girls." "Why not cut that too?" suggests my master. "Oh no! I wouldn't feel right if I abandoned that story, for it provides exceedingly valuable data by which to compare the characters of the modern women with those of their predecessors in the early Meiji era." Now, as I was saying, when my father and I arrived in front of Iseigen, the maiden monger addressed my father in this term: "How about one of these here little leftovers? Take a toddler, sir. I'll make you a special cheap." Uh, he puts his shoulder paw down on the ground and is wiping sweat from his brow. In each of two damp panniers there's a little girl about 2 years old. My father say, "If they are really cheap I might, but is this all you have got?" The man replies, "Yes, sir, I'm afraid so. Today I've sold them all out, except for these two little ones. Take your choice." He holds the little girls up in his hands as I told you, pumpkins, and he pushes them under my father's nose. My father taps on their head as one might rap a melon and says, "Yes, they sound quite good." The negotiation then began in earnest, and after a great deal of chaffering, my father finally says, "That's all very well, but can you guarantee their quality?" "Yes," says the man. "The one in the leading basket, I can take me an oath, is sound, 'cause I've had her long day right in front of me on two peepers, but the other backside basket one could be a wee mite cracked. I've got no eyes of the back of me head, so I won't go making no promises. Tell you what, just for you, I'll knock a bit more off for that one." To this day, I can still clearly remember every word of their dickering. And though only a nipper myself, I did then learn how insidiously cracked a little girl can be. However, in this 38th year of the emperor's reign, there's none so foolish now as to go trotting through the streets with little girls for sale. So one no longer hears people saying how those at the back, those that one can't keep one's own sharp watchful eyes on, are liable to be damaged. It is consequently my opinion that, thanks to the beneficent influx of Western civilization, the conduct of women has in fact improved. What do you think, Coleman? Coleman hesitated, cleared his throat, and then gave his opinion in a low and measured tone. "Women today on their way to and from schools, at concerts, at charity parties, and at garden parties are in effect clearly selling themselves. Their light behavior is tantamount to such statements as, 'Hey, how about buying me?' or 'Oh, so you're not much interested.' There is accordingly no contemporary need for hawkers or other middlemen selling on commission. The street cries of our modern cities are of course the poorer by the disappearance of maiden mongers shouting their wares. Such changes are bound to follow from the introduction and dissemination of modern ideas of the individual independence. The older generation get unnecessarily worked up and moan and groan as though the world were coming to its end. But the trend of modern civilization, and I, for one, welcome and encourage these changes. For instance, there's no need nowadays for anyone to go tapping pert hot on the skull to see if they are good enough to buy. In any case, no one ever gets anywhere near in this hard world by being so unduly choosy. That way, one can easily end up husbandless as well, and even after 50 or 60 years of assiduous search, still not be a bride. One moment, please. Okay, I'll see you later, Chloe. I'll take a quick hydration break. Alright, I'm back. Okay. Coleman, very much a bright young man in this 20th century, spoke for his generation, and having so spoken, blew a cigarette smoke into Waverhouse's face. But Waverhouse is not a man to flinch from a mere residue of burnt tobacco. As you say, he responded, among schoolgirls and young ladies nowadays, their very flesh and bones are permeated with, if not actually manufactured, of self-esteem and self-confidence, and it is indeed admirable that they should prove themselves a match for man in every possible field. Take, for instance, the girls at the high school near my house. They are terrific. Talked out in trousers, they hang themselves upside down from iron wall bars. Truly, it's wonderful. Every time I look down from my upstairs window and see them catapulting about their gymnastics, I am reminded of the Grecian ladies pursuing strength and beauty through the patterns of calisthenics. Oh no, not the Greeks again, says my master with something like a sneer. It's unavoidable. It just so happens that almost everything aesthetically beautiful seems to have originated in Greece. Aesthetics and the Greeks, you speak of one and you are speaking of the other. When I see one of those dark-skinned girls putting their whole hearts into their gymnastics, into my mind invariably leaps the story of Agnotis. He's wearing his font of all wisdom face as he babbles on and on. So you have managed to find another of those awkward names, says Coleman with his usual witless grin. Agnes was a wonderful woman. When I look back at her across the gulf of centuries, still I am impressed. In those days, in those far days of laws of Athens forbade women to be midwives. It was most inconvenient. One can easily see why Agnes thought it is unreasonable. What's that? What's that word? Agnes, a woman. It's a woman's name. Now, this woman said to herself, "It's really lamentable that women cannot be midwives. Inconvenient too. I wish to God I could become a midwife. Isn't there a way I can?" So she thought and thought, doing nothing else for 3 days straight, and just at dawn of the third day, as she heard the yowling of a newborn next door, the solution flashed upon her. She immediately cut off her long hair, dressed herself as a man, and took to attending the lectures on childbirth and then being given by the eminent Harold Phillis. He learned all that he could teach, and feeling her time had come, set up as a midwife. Do you know, Mrs. Neese? She was a great success. Here, there, everywhere, yowling babies put in their appearance, and since they were all assisted by Agnes, she made a fortune. However, the ways of heaven are proverbially inscrutable. For 7 ups there are 8 downs. It never rains but pours. Her secret was discovered. She was hauled before the courts, and she stood in danger in the direct punishment for breaking the law of the Athens. "You sound like a professional storyteller," says Mrs. Neese. "Aren't I good?" Well then, at that point, all women of Athens got together and signed such an enormous round robin in support of Agnes that the magistrates felt unable to ignore it. In the end, she was let off, and the law was changed to allow women to become midwives, and they all lived happily ever after. "You do know about so many things. It's wonderful," sighs Mrs. Neese. "True. I know almost everything about almost everything. Perhaps the only thing I don't know all about is the real extent of my own foolishness. But even on that, I can make a pretty good guess, I guess." Sorry. "You do say such funny things." Mrs. Neese was still chortling away when the front door bell, its tone unchanged since the day it was first installed, began to tinkle. "What? Another visitor?" squeaked Mrs. Neese, and scuttled off into the living room. And who should it be but our old friend Beauchamp Blowlamp. With his arrival, the entire cast of the eccentric who haunt my master's house was gathered upon stage. Lest that should sound ungracious, perhaps I could better emphasize that sufficient eccentrics are gathered to keep a cat amused, and it would indeed be ungracious if I were not satisfied with that. Had I had the misfortune to dwell in some other household, I might have lived 9 lives and never known such remarkable scholars, and even one such remarkable scholar could be found among mankind. I could count myself fortunate to be sitting here, his adopted cat child, beside my noble master. It is, moreover, a rare privilege to be numbered among the disciples of Professor Sneeze, for only thus I am enabled, comfortably lying down, to observe the manners and actions not only my master but such heroic figures, such matchless warriors as Waverhouse Coleman and the bold Sir Beauchamp. Even in this vast city such personages are rare, and I take it as the highest accolade that I am accepted by them as one of their company. It is Only the consciousness of that honor that enables me to forget the hardship of being condemned to endure this heat in a fur bag. And I am especially grateful thus to be kept amused for a whole half day. Whenever the four of them get together like this, something entertaining is about to transpire, so I watch them respectfully from the draught cool place by the door, to which I have retired. I'm afraid I haven't been around to see you for quite some time, says Beauchamp with a modest bow. His head, I notice, shines as brightly as it did the other day. Judged by his head alone, he might have been taken for a second-rate actor, but the ceremonious manner in which he wears his very stiff white cotton hakama makes him look like nothing so much as a student swordsman from the fencing school of the fencing school of Sakakibara's Kenkichi. Indeed, the only part of Beauchamp's body which looks in the least bit of normal is the section between his hips and shoulders. Well, how very nice of you to call in this hot weather too. Come right in. Waverhouse, as usual, plays the host in someone else's home. I haven't seen you for a long time, sir, Beauchamp says to him. Quite so. Not, I believe that since the reading party last spring. Are you still active in that line? Have you again performed the part of the high-class prostitute? You did very well. I applauded you like mad. Did you notice? Yes, I was very much encouraged. Your kind appreciation gave me the strength to carry on until the end. When are you having your next meeting? Interjects my master. We rest during July and August, but we hope to be livening up again in September. Can you suggest anything interesting we might tackle? Well, my master answers half-heartedly. Look here, Beauchamp, says Colmoon suddenly. Why don't you try my piece? If it's yours, it must be interesting. What's this piece you have written? A drama? Says Colmoon with the brass-based equanimity he could master. His three companions are dumbfounded and stare upon him with looks of unanimous wonder. A drama? Good for you! A comedy or tragedy? Beauchamp was the first to recover and find his tongue. With the utmost composure, Colmoon gives his reply. It is neither a comedy nor a tragedy. Since people this day are always fussing about whether a play should be an old-style drama or new-style drama, I decided to invent a totally new type and have accordingly written what I call a haiku play. What on earth is a haiku play? A play imbued by the spirit of haiku. My master and Waverhouse, apparently dazed by the concept of essentially tiny poems blown out to the length of the play, says nothing, but Beauchamp presses on. How do you implement that interesting idea? Well, since the work of the haiku mode, I decided that it should not be too lengthy or too viciously clear-cut. It is, accordingly, a one-act play, in fact, a single scene. I understand. Let me first describe the setting. It must, of course, be very simple. I envisage one big willow in the center of the stage. From its trunk, a single branch extends stage right, and on the branch there's a crow. Won't the crow fly off? Says my master. Thank you, Deanne. Everyone's gathered all together today. It's so cute. Won't the crow fly off? Says my master worriedly, as if talking to himself. That's no problem. One just tie the crow's leg to the branch with a stoutish bit of string. Now, beneath the branch there's a wooden bathtub, and in the bathtub, sitting sideways, there's a beautiful woman washing herself with a cotton towel. That's a bit decadent. Besides, who could you get to play the woman? Asked Waverhouse. Again, no problem. Just hire a model from an art school. The Metropolitan Police Bureau would undoubtedly prove sticky. My master's worriment is not allayed. But it ought to be all right so long as one doesn't present this work of art as some form of show. If this were the sort of thing that the police get sticky about, it would be impossible to ever draw from the nude. But nude models are provided for students to study, not just to stare at. If you scholars, the intellectual cream of Japan, remain so straight-laced in your ancient bigotry, there's no real hope for the future of Japan. What's the distinction between painting and a drama? Are they not both arts? Coleman, very evidently enjoying himself, lashes out at the prudery of his listeners. Well, let's leave all that for a moment, says Beauchamp. But tell me how your play proceeds. He may not intend to use the play, but he clearly wants to know how the promising opening scene will be developed. Enter the haiku poet Takahama Kyoshi. He advances along the ramp leading to the stage carrying a walking stick and wearing a white pith helmet. Under his silk gaze surcoat, his white kimono, patterned with colored splashes, is tucked at the back. He wears shoes in the Western style. He is thus costumed to look like any contractor of army supplies, but being a haiku poet, he must walk in a leisurely manner, looking as though deeply absorbed in the composition of a poem. When he reaches the main stage, he notices the first willow tree and then the light-skinned lady in her bath. Startled, he looks up and sees the crow peering down at her from its long branch. At this point, the poet strikes the pose, which should be held for at least 50 seconds to indicate how deeply he is moved by the refined haiku effects of the scene before him. Then, in deep resonant voice, he declaims, "A crow is in love with the woman in the bath." As soon as the last word has been spoken, the clappers are cracked and the curtain falls. Well, what do you think of it? Don't you like it? I need hardly to say any sensible man would rather play the part of a haiku poet of that of a high-class tart. Beauchamp, however, looked undecided and comments with a serious face, "It seems too short. I think it needs a little bit more action, something that will add real human interest." Waverhouse, who has so far keeping comparatively quiet, can hardly be expected indefinitely to pass up such splendid opportunity for display of his peculiar talents. "So that wee bit of a thing is what you call a haiku play? Quite awful." Ueda Bean is constantly pointing out in his essays and articles that the spirit of haiku, and also indeed the comic spirit, lacks constructive positivism. He argues that they undermine the morals and hence the morale of the Japanese nation. And, as one would expect, whatever Bean points out is very much on the point. He would have you laugh out of town if you dared restaging such an artsy, crafty bit of rubbish. In any case, it's also unclean cut that no one could tell whether it's meant to be straight theatre or burlesque. A thing so indeterminate could in fact be anything. Forgive me that I take the liberty of saying so, my dear Coleman, but I really do think that you would do better to stay in your laboratory and limit your creativity to the grinding of glass balls. You could, I'm sure, write hundreds of such plays, but since they could achieve nothing but the ruin of our nation, what would be the point? Coleman looks slightly huffed. Do you think its effect is as demoralizing as all that? Myself, I think it's constructive, positive, definitely yeah saying. He is seeking to vindicate something too unimportant to merit vindication. The point is that Kyoshi actually makes the crow fall in love with the woman. His lines having that effect are, I consider, an affirmation of life, and that I think is very positivist. Now that, says Waverhouse, is a totally new approach, a novel concept, casting fresh light upon dramatic theory. We must listen with deepest attention. As a Bachelor of Science, such an idea that a crow falling in love with a woman strikes me as illogical. Quite so? But this illogicality is expressed with such consummate artistry that it does seem in the least illogical to the audience. The effect of great dramatic artistry, in fact, to impose upon the listener a willing suspension of disbelief. I doubt it, says my master in the tones of deepest dubiety, but Coleman pays him no heed. You ask why the unreasonable should not sound unreasonable. Well, when I have given you the psychological explanation, you will understand why. Of course, the emotion of being in love or not being in love can only be experienced by the poet. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the crow. Similarly, the concept of the crow in love is not a concept likely to cross the mind of a crow. In short, it is the poet himself who is in love with the moment. The moment Kyoshi clapped his eyes on her, he must have fallen head over heels in love. He then sees the crow sitting immobile on the branch staring at her. Being himself smitten with love for the lady, he assumes that the crow is similarly moved. He is, of course, mistaken, but nevertheless, indeed, for that very reason, the basic idea that the play is not simply literary but positivist as well. I would in particular suggest that manner in which the poet, while still contriving himself to appear objective and heart-free, transposes his own sentiment to become Crow's sentiments, indisputably yes-saying and positivist. I ask you, gentlemen, am I not right? It is a well-turned argument, says Waverhouse, but I bet it would leave Kyoshi, if he ever heard it, distinctly taken aback. I accept that your exposition of the play is a positive, but if the play were to be staged, the audience reaction would undoubtedly be negative. Don't you agree, Beauchamp? Yes, I confess that it's a little too negative, Beauchamp confesses with due critical gravity. My master seems to think that things have gone far enough, and to ease the pressure upon his favorite disciple, he seeks to lead the conversation away from Coleman's ill-received venture into literary field. But tell me, Beauchamp, he says, have you ever perhaps written any new masterpieces recently? Nothing really worth showing new, but I am, in fact, thinking about publishing a collection to them of them. Luckily, I chance to have the manuscript with me. I would welcome your opinion of these trifles I have composed. He thereupon produced from his breast a package wrapped in a cloth of purple crepe. Loosening the material, he carefully extracted the notebook, some 50 or 60 pages thick, which he proceeded to deposit reverently before my master. My master assumes his most magisterial mien, and then, with a grave "Allow me," opens the book. There, on the first page, stands an inscription dedicated to frail Opula. My master stared at the page, wordless and with enigmatic expression on his face. For such a long time, Waverhouse peered across beside him. What have he here? New style poetry? Aha! Already dedicated. How splendid of you, Beauchamp, he says with all the enthusiasm of a hound on the scent, to come out bang with so bold a dedication to, if my eyes do not deceive me, a certain Opula? My master, now looking more puzzled than enigmatic, turns to the poet. My dear Beauchamp, he says, this Opula, is she a real person? Oh yes, indeed. She's one of the young ladies whom I've invited to our last reading party. The one where Waverhouse so generously applauded me. She lives, in fact, in this neighborhood. Actually, I called her at her home on my way here, but learned to my sorrow that she's been away since last month. I gather that the whole family is spending the summer at Oiso. Beauchamp looked peculiarly solemn, as with corroborative detail he affirms the reality of his dedication. Come on, Sneeze. Don't go pulling a long face like that. This is the 20th century and you best get used to it. Let's get down to the considering let's get down to considering the masterpiece. First of all, Beauchamp, this dedication seems a bit of a boss shot. What do you mean by frail? Well, I mean frail in the romantic sense, to convey the idea of a person infinitely delicate, infinitely refined and ethereal. Did you know? Well, word can of course be so used, but it does have other coarser connotations, especially if it were read as an adjectival noun. You could be thought to be calling her some sort of Freudian. So if I were you, I would rephrase it. Could you suggest how? I would like it to be unmisinterpretably poetic. Well, I think I would say something like dedicated to all that's frail beneath the nares of opulence. It wouldn't involve much change in wording, but it yet it make an enormous difference in feeling. I see, says Beauchamp. Well, it was quite clear that he doesn't understand the balderdash proposed by Waverhouse. He is trying hard to look as though he had grasped, considered, and accepted it. My master, who has been sitting there silently, turning to the first page and begins to read aloud from the opening section. In the fragrance of the incense which I burn, when I am weary, seemingly, your soul thrills in the smoky twist and turn of love requited. Woe, ah, woe is me, who in this world as bitter as this must in the midst of useless yearning yearn for the sweet fire of your impassioned kiss. This, I'm afraid, he says with a sigh, is a bit beyond me, and he passes the notebook along to Waverhouse. The effect is strained, the imagery too heightened, says Waverhouse, passing it to Coleman. I see, says Coleman, returns it to the author. It's only natural that you should fail to understand it. Beauchamp leaps to his own defense. In the last 10 years, the world of poetry has advanced and altered out of all recognition. Modern poetry is not easy. You can't understand it if you do no more than glance through it in bed or while you are away at a railway station. More often than not, modern poets are unable to answer even the simplest question about their own work. Such poets write by their direct inspiration and are not to be held responsible for more than the writing. annotations, critical commentary, and exegesis. All this may be left to the scholars. We poets are not to be bothered by such a trivia. Only the other day, some fellow with a name like Sōseki published a short story entitled A Single Night. But it's so vague that no one could make a head or tail of it. I eventually got hold of the man and questioned him very seriously about the real meaning of his story. He not only refused to give any explanation, but even implied that if the story happened in fact to have any meaning at all, he couldn't care less. His attitude was, I think, typical of a modern poet. Dude, how very meta is that, bro? Mentioning his own name in his own novel? Dude! Oh! Luna Sissy, thank you so much for the follow. Thank you so much. It means a lot to me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for all the listeners in the live stream right now, and thank you to everyone who is here with me in the venue. Unfortunately, it is indeed raining again. I hope that it doesn't affect you too much. We do have tents that you can take refuge under. But yes, thank you so much, Luna Cici, for the follow. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. Do check my stream schedule for my next stream. I stream reading content and also in-game content, like the MSQ and the rating scene as well. Yes. All right, let's continue the story after a quick hydration. But yes, how very meta of Sōseki, huh? Mentioning his own name in his own novel. Damn. He may be a poet, but he sounds, doesn't he, downright odd, observed my master. Oh my god, I'm sorry. The self-insert master is basically Sōseki, and Sōseki is calling himself odd. Isn't that amazing, guys? He's a fool. He's like dissing himself in his own novel. Jesus Christ, this guy, I love him so much. Oh, yes, Lee, thank you for the follow. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you, yes, Lee. Thank you. Thank you for staying in this stream so far. Let's continue. He's a fool. Waverhouse demolishes the Sōseki in one curt breath. Beauchamp, however, has by no means finished defending the merits of his own daft poem. Nobody in our poetry group is in any associated with this Sōseki fellow, but it would be unreasonable if you gentlemen were to condemn my poems by reason of some such imagined association. I took great pains the construction of this work, and I would like in particular to draw your attention to my telling contrast of this bitter world with the sweetness of a kiss. The pains you must have taken, says my master somewhat ambiguously, have not gone unremarked. Indeed, says Waverhouse, the skill with which you have made bitter and sweet reflect each other, and is as interesting as if you had spiced each syllable with a haiku of 17 different peppery tastes. The saying speaks only 7 such peppery tangs, but so tasteful, Beauchamp, is the concoction you have cooked up, that no saying is sufficiently to say how inimitable it is, and how totally lost I am in admiration of your art. Rather unkindly, Waverhouse diverts himself at the expense of an honest man. Possibly for that reason my master suddenly got to his feet and went off to his study. Possibly not. for he quickly re-emerged with a piece of paper in his hand. One quick moment of pause, please. Sorry, I'm back. Okay. What an interesting reading today, yeah? How very meta of Sōseki. Okay. Now that we have considered Colemoon's play and Beauchamp's poem, perhaps you will grant me the boon of your expert comments on this little thing here that I have written. My master looks as if he means what he says to be taken seriously. If so, he is to be immediately disappointed. If it's that epitaph thing for the Mr. the late and sainted natural man, I've heard it twice already, if not thrice, says Waverhouse dismissingly. For heaven's sakes, Waverhouse, why don't you just pipe down? Now, Beauchamp, I would like you to understand that this is not an example of my best and serious work. I wrote it just for fun, so I'm not especially proud of it, but let's just see if you like it. I'll be delighted to hear it. You too, Colemoon, since you are here. Might as well listen to it. Of course, but it's not long, is it? Very short, I doubt, says my master quite untruthfully. Whether it contains as many as 60 words and 10, whereupon, giving no opportunity for further interruptions, he launches out upon a recital of his homespun masterwork. "The spirit of Japan!" cries Japanese man. "Long may it live!" cries he. But his cry breaks off in that kind of cough which comes from the soul's TB. What a magnificent opening, burbles Colemoon with a real enthusiasm. The theme rises before one, immediately undodgeable and imposing like a mountain. "The spirit of Japan!" screams the papers. Pickpockets scream it too. In one great jump, the Japanese spirit crosses the blue ocean and is lectured upon in England, while a play on this staggering theme is a huge success on the German stage. A huge success! A scream! "Splendid," says Waverhouse, letting his head fall backward in token of his approbation. "It's better than the epiphanic epitaph. Admiral Togo has the Japanese spirit, so has the man in the street. Fish shop managers, swindlers, murderers, none would complete, none would be the men they are, none would be a man, if he wasn't up like a tuppenny cup in the spirit of Japan." "Please," breathes Colemoon, "please do mention Colemoon has it too. But if you ask what this spirit is, they give you that cough and say, 'The spirit of Japan is the Japanese spirit.' Then they walk away, and when they walk 10 yards or so, they clear their throats of phlegm. And that clearing sound is the Japanese spirit. Manifest them." "Oh, I like that," says Waverhouse. "That's very well-turned phrase, niece. You've got talent, a real literary talent. And the next stanza? Is the spirit of Japan triangular? Is it, do you think, square? Why, no, indeed. As the words themselves explicitly declare, it is an airy, fairy, spiritual thing, and things that close to God can't be defined in formula or measured in measuring rod. It is certainly interesting composition and most unusual in that, defying in tradition, it has strong didactic element. But don't you think it contains too many spirits of Japan one can have, says Beauchamp, mildly, too much of the best things. A good point, I agree. Waverhouse chips in yet again with the two pennyworth of tar. The stanza continues. There's no one man in the whole of Japan who has not used the phrase, but I have not met one user yet knows what it conveys, the spirit of Japan, the Japanese spirit. Could it conceivably be nothing but another of those long-nosed goblins only the mad can see? My master comes to the end of his poem, and believing it pregnant with eminently debatable material, sits back in expectation of an avalanche of comment. However, though the piece is undoubtedly that masterpiece for which the anthologists have been waiting, its endless Western form and its lack of clear meaning have resulted in the present audience not realizing the recitation is over. They, accordingly, just sit there for a long time. Eventually, no more verses being vouchsafed them, Moon ventures. Is that all? My master answers with a non-committal, I thought falsely carefree kind of throaty grunt. Very much contrary to my own expectation, Waverhouse failed to rise to the occasion with one of his usual flights of fantastication. Instead, after a brief interval, he turned to my master and said, How about collecting some of your shorter pieces into work? Then you too could dedicate it to someone. How about to you? My master flippantly suggests. Not on your life, says Waverhouse very firmly. He takes out the scissors which he had earlier analyzed for the benefit of Mrs. Neese and begins clipping away at his fingernails. Colmoon turns to Beauchamp and somewhat cautiously enquires, Are you closely acquainted with Miss Opula Goldfield? After I invited her to our reading party last spring, we became friends and we now see quite a lot of each other. Whenever I'm with her, I feel as if it were inspired, and even after we parted, I still feel, at least for quite some time, such a flame alight within me that poems, both in the traditional form and in the modern style, come singing up like steam from kettle. I believe that this little collection contains so high a proportion of love poems precisely because I'm so deeply stirred by women, and in particular by her. The only way I know which to express my sincere gratitude is by dedicating this book to the source of its inspiration. I stand at the end of a long tradition, inasmuch as since the time immemorial, no poet write no poet wrote fine poetry save under the inspiration of some deeply cherished woman. Is that indeed so? Says Coleman, as though he had just learned the fact of imponderable gravity. But deep behind the sober skin of his face, I could see him laughing at the folly of his friend. Even at this gathering of gas bags cannot wheeze on forever, and the pressure of their conversation is now fast whimpering down towards exhaustion. Being under no obligation to listen all day to their endless blather and their carping and flapdoodle, I excused myself and went out into the garden in search of praying mantis. The sun is going down. Its reddened light, filtered through the green foliage of Sultan's parasol, flecks the ground in patches. High up on the trunk of a tree, cicadas are singing their hearts out. Tonight, perhaps, a little rain may fall. And that is the end of chapter 3 of volume 2. Very unexpected, isn't it? But yes, that is the end of volume 3 of chapter 3 volume 2. Thank you very much for being here. And surprisingly, there's a chapter 4 in volume 2. So we will be reading chapter 4 in volume 2 on this coming Friday. Yeah? And I hope that all of you can make it in time. All of you can make it here. And once again, oh my god, uh once again, I cannot express how grateful I am to all of you, all of you, all of you, all of you, all of you. I cannot express how deeply, 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 deeply um, grateful I am with everyone who attends to the event in game and everyone who is in my live stream right now. Thank you so much for the follows. Let me see. Thank you for thank you to Luna CC who followed. Thank you to Cardinal Daniel who followed today. Thank you to Yesli who followed today. Thank you to everyone who stays on to listen to my reading. And I hope that I did a good job today. I'm always very nervous, but I really hope that I did okay today at least. And okay, so once again, I repeat, I do every alternate morning readings at 10 a.m. GMT plus 8. The next one will be on this coming Friday morning, and I hope that you all can make it as well. Thank you so much for attending. I'm very, very happy and I'm very, very grateful for everyone. I'm really, really, really grateful and happy. And to all the people who followed me, um, you can check out my Twitter as well. I always announce when I am streaming. And besides the streaming of Nudibles, I also stream raiding content and other gaming in-game content as well. So I hope that you all will drop by and take a look sometimes. And also this current house, which belongs to Deanne, will soon be turned into a Nudible event house. A Nudible. I'm sorry, a Nudible venue basically. It will be in the basement. I know it sounds very sketchy, but don't worry. We don't kidnap people and leave them without their kidneys. Don't worry about that. The Nudible house should be ready by Friday, hopefully, and we won't be doing the readings outside here anymore. We will be doing the readings inside the house in the basement. And I hope that I will see you guys again on this coming Friday. Thank you so much. Lots of love to everyone. I hope you have an incredible, Wednesday. Wednesday sometimes is like the hardest day to pass by because it's like in the middle of the week and it's very annoying. Like you're in between like, oh, it's gonna be Friday, but it's like still in the middle of the week. It's very annoying. But yeah. I hope you have a wonderful and lovely Wednesday, and I will be streaming later to do my re-clears today. So once again, follow me on my Twitter. I will, and also my Twitch, so that you will get a notification when I stream my re-clears later. You can see how badly I raid. And for those who do not know, I do have a raid phase, and this is my raid phase, and I have to like always, yeah, this is my raid phase. I have to put the disclaimer, uh, in, because I don't want people to think that I'm angry at them, and this is just my raid phase on. So, um, yes, I'll be raiding later. So, but I I hope you guys will be there later. All right, I'm wrapping up this stream right now, and I will be back after lunch. Everyone, grab something yummy to eat, and I'll be back later for awesome, awesome, awesome rating content. I'll see you guys soon. Oh my god. All right, and to everyone, usually I bow to my. Oh, no, no, no. Oh my god. No. Usually I bow to my stream, and then I say a goodbye. Adios! And I am now closing my stream. Have a very stupid Ian. Have a very good day. Thank you so much for the follows and the listening. I'll see you guys soon after lunch in about an hour or two, or maybe sooner. We'll see how it goes. Goodbye!